Hi, welcome back. This is Angie with Angie's Beyond the Lecture, and this is the fourth installment of our chemistry final exam review, and this is in essence the fundamentals or foundations of chemistry. So we're essentially looking at the first, maybe quarter of the semester and just reviewing the fundamentals here. In this particular section, it actually won't take very long to cover. It's scientific method, and it's just a review on some questions you might see in your final exam or even at that quizzes throughout the semester, particularly the beginning. And we have some key terms here. And then I also want to discuss towards the bottom of this particular section, we're looking at theory versus law. And hopefully a way to help you differentiate the two. So back to the beginning, we have what's called observation, and that's sort of the beginning of our whole scientific method process. So observations are simply information we take in through the senses as scientists, or measurements, and we lead to questions, right? And hopefully leading into the next definition, which is our hypothesis, we can answer those questions and come up with ways of answering a particular phenomena, okay? So a hypothesis in general is considered something that's testable. It's an educated explanation. And I think most students have heard that throughout middle school and high school. So hopefully this definition is not new to you all. And in the end, a hypothesis must be specific and capable of being supported or rejected through the experimental process, which leads us to the next definition, which is what is an experiment? And essentially, that's a controlled procedure designed to test a hypothesis. And the characteristics of a good experiment include controls, variables, and procedures that can be replicated. So in essence, can someone look at your experiment and duplicate it without a lot of problem, okay? Now, the IV and DV notation, that just simply means independent variable and dependent variable. And those are common questions they might ask you in chemistry and even in physics or biology, where you just have to identify, given the layout of an experiment, which part is the independent variable and which part is the dependent variable. We'll see an example of that later in our questions for the exam review at the end. Independent variables are just variables in the experiment that you change to see if they make a difference in the overall outcome. Dependent variables are the result of that change. So a classic example would be in biology and chemistry, you set up an experiment to see what might affect the growth of plants. And you could keep several things the same. You could perhaps give them the same food, keep them in the same area of the house, control the temperature, but perhaps you change the amount of sunlight they get throughout the day. And that would be your independent variable, would be the amount of sunlight that they receive over a period of time. And then your dependent variable would be what would possibly change as an outcome. Well, you might have a taller plant or a shorter plant in that scenario. And again, this is very big picture, generic views, but these could be the types of questions that you see in chemistry and even other science topics. Now, theory and law. So we're going to look at these throughout the semester, and I'll give examples of each. So a well-tested explanation is that describes why something happens. This is what a theory is. Theories are supported by evidence. So they've had experiments run and peer reviews and things like that. They can be modified if something comes up and changes how researchers look at a particular problem or phenomena. Then they will modify that theory. Now, common ones we'll look at in chemistry would be your atomic theory and kinetic molecular theory. KMT, that's part of the assumptions we make in ideal gases. For laws, that's our Second and final term here in this video, a law is simply a concise statement or mathematical relationship. The key here is mathematical relationship that describe what happens under certain conditions and nature. So laws don't explain why, they just give a relationship. A very common example would be, and I can add this to the sheet here, would be the ideal gas law. A lot of them are in the gas laws unit. So you have the ideal gas law, Boyle's gas law, the combined gas law, and it just basically describes what happens under certain temperatures and pressures and volumes and so on. And students might be asked, okay, I'm going to give you a situation here. Is this a theory or is this a law? And you just have to pick out what it is. And of course, they won't, a lot of these are named theories or laws, right? So they're going to be kind of a little ambiguous. Like they might say, for instance, I'll give you a sentence here. Actually, we'll go over that in the review. I do have a review question that covers that, where it's one of the two, and it's easily recognizable. You just have to remember if it's a law or a theory. So again, to sum this up, a law describes what happens. A theory is sort of the background and why, and it's been extensively researched and documented, and it's a generally accepted part of our chemistry studies. So that's it for this video. Again, we're just recapping the scientific method with observations, hypotheses, and experiment, and then the difference between theories and law. See you in the next video.